In 100 years in Arlington, Texas, how many air conditioners will I have replaced?
6, 7?
6, 7? Sure. If I build that same house today and I make sure that I've got it well insulated, sealed well, good ventilation, good tight ductwork, how many times will I have to reblow the attic in that house?
Never.
Okay. So where's the real return on investment?
Insulation and air sealing.
Yes, sir.
This is the one and only, the original podcast where you can find yours and your business's true value. You're listening to Our Value.
Brought to you by America's insulation source, IDI Distributors.
You want to hear from the best contractors, suppliers, and consultants that dedicate themselves to more than just survival in the business world?
Industry professionals that are dedicated to excellence in every aspect of their business.
Our Value has them all here to share that same motivation and knowledge with you. Tune in and grow a more successful, profitable, educated, and recognized business. Listen to the Our Value podcast to become the industry leader in your market. Find your value with Our Value.
Well, I would like to welcome you to today's Our Value podcast for all you insulators, HVAC contractors, and general listeners out there. Today, we are going to be talking to one of the wise people in the industry, one of the people that have been around for a while, bridging the insulation industry, the HVAC industry, and the code industry. I am talking about Rick Hall from Building Science Professional Training. Rick has been training HVAC and insulation contractors since 2008. He trained and field certified HERS raters, building analysts on the EPA, NATE, ESCO certifications for HVAC. This guy has been around the block in terms of talking to contractors about their everyday woes and then training them on the collective knowledge that we all have. Rick, welcome to the Our Value podcast. How's it going this morning?
Going well, Ken. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Hey, I'm going to start right off, Rick, with how many HVAC contractors and insulators do you train, advise, or even just come in contact with in a year?
On an annual basis, probably 250 to 350.
So 250 to 350 a year. Now, I would imagine you're seeing the best and brightest, considering the fact they're seeking knowledge, from you. So of those HVAC contractors or, installers, people in the industry, how many do you think really understand the changes that we've made in the load on the buildings over the last 15 years?
Very few. And I say this because most of the contractors, as an example, out of the contractor last week, when I was asking them, are you changing out? Are you swapping out? And this is not just new construction. People think we change the load on new construction as we improve the codes. Well, the reality is people are getting insulation and air sealing every day on an existing home, a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old home. And I had a couple of guys in from New York, and most of the homes they work on are 60 and 70 years old. So we're changing the load every day. It's not just a new construction side. As a result of it, when I asked the question last week of about 19 people in the room, if you change out a 3-ton air conditioner, what do you put back in? And they told me a 3-ton air conditioner. What are you doing for block load calculation? How are you determining? And they're telling me they're using software, but they didn't have any idea how to measure the insulation that might have been blown into walls. They were just using defaults. And this is a pretty good, solid, reputable company. They just too often contractors are working in, and their employees are working in the industry without sufficient enough training for on industry. And I got an email from the operations manager on Monday, said, thank you. We really are going to start making some changes in how we're going to do things. Because they were also recognizing, after I showed them expanded performance data charts, and the irony is this company's been in business for over 30 years in the California area. Their management and ownership was not aware of expanded performance data charts. And so I think that we we have a habit in our industry, in the heat and air conditioning industry. This is my 42nd year in the HVAC industry in one way, shape, or form. And we have a habit of wash, rinse, repeat. So if we took a 3-ton out, we're going to put a 3-ton back in. And that isn't true. The question I ask most contractors, I'll ask them if they've ever seen a 2x4. They'll tell me, well, yeah, I have. And I'll say, was it 2 or 4? It was neither. It was 1.5 by 3.5. Same way with tonnage. I should make it my mission to eliminate the verbiage tonnage and just go to the number of BTUs, because tonnage means nothing. I showed them an expanded performance data chart on a 15-SEER air conditioning system that showed the 3-ton air conditioner only delivering at design conditions somewhere in the neighborhood of 32,000 BTUs. Well, I thought 3 tons was 36,000 BTUs. If they were taking out one system and it was actually underrated, an older system that might have had a 37 or 38,000 BTU rating, but was called 3 tons, they're putting in a new one that is only 32,000 BTUs rated, even though it's called a 3-ton. So I asked the service, I had one full day with service technicians. I said, what's your number one complaint? Is it this new air conditioner doesn't seem to cool as well as my old one did? And all 19 of the heads bobbled up and down. So I think we talk a good game in our industry, in the heat and air conditioning industry, about education. Remember this, there are over 100,000 heating and air conditioning contractors, according to the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. I only reach about 20 of them. Now, I'm not the only guy doing this, but who's going to that depth? Because I go to that depth to show you why it's wrong, why what you're doing today is wrong, and how you can change it. And I left with a conversation with the owner and the operations manager on Friday of both of them saying, we will never do that again. And I said, bravo. We're never going to just swap out a 3-ton for a 3-ton. We're going to start understanding the expanded performance data charts a little bit deeper. It's not a real deep dive, but it is a little bit below the surface. You can't just skate on the surface and think that you're going to be continuing to do right by your customer, because you're not. And Ken, that's not just California. California is fortunate because of low humidity. I ask that same question in Texas when I do training, in Louisiana when I do training, in Florida when I do training for them. And I get the same response. Yes, I change out like equipment. Most of the contractors that I work with do residential retrofit. They don't do new construction. So to think in terms of code, they're thinking about the current code for what they're doing. In reference to your question, when you said the changing loads, they're paying very little attention to it. They're just because, oh, well, the duct is sized to, no, it's not sized to the right size. Matter of fact, it's probably undersized. All the data suggests that ductwork is undersized. So if we do a few things, we might be able to get right-sized equipment in there, because the ductwork we won't have to change. We can do right-sized equipment, and voila, we've actually matched the equipment to the duct, not the duct to the equipment.
So if I ask you then, because I know you do see some new construction, if we look at the new construction ones and loop them in, what percentage of those do you believe actually run a manual J? And when I say actually, I mean the right way. What percentage do you think are done correctly on new?
So I'll go 2 different areas. One, I'll go to production builders who are submitting plans to design companies. And the other one, I'll go to contract builders who are custom home builders who are working with the homeowner on the front end. That builder is probably, or my experience is that they're most often working with a local heating and air conditioning contractor, and the local HVAC contractor doesn't believe that the manual J gives enough flexibility, so they fudge a few things. They're adding additional loads. They will not do things. They're trying to hit the target and never hitting the bullseye. And I'll give you an example, a recent example. that I had in Tucson, Arizona. I'll not name any contractors or any builders or anything. I was given the plans to 2 different houses in Tucson. One is about 1,320 square feet. The other one's 1,560 square feet. I did load calculations for both of them. The original HVAC contractor had an engineering firm do a load calculation. They were using a lot of defaults. They came up with a 36,000 BTU or 3-ton load on both of the units, 1,320 and 1,560. Instead of just trying to hit the target, I tried to hit the bullseye. And when I hit the bullseye, mine was a 15,000 BTU load on the 1,320 and an 18,000 BTU load on the 1,560 square foot home. And I ended up doing that based on worst case orientation. So it wasn't like I was trying to decrease the load. I put everything in overhang. It's a little more cumbersome, takes a little more time, but the overhang, the shading coefficient, the U value, the windows, don't just use the default. So I put everything in the way that the house was being designed, and my top load was 18,000 BTUs and their load was 36,000 BTUs. Now in Tucson, because there's not a humidity load, you can get away with a little bit of oversizing. But if I did that same thing in Dallas, Texas, or in Orlando, Florida, that would be a callback, because we would be oversized. Our sensible load would satisfy real quick, and we'd be sweating like all get out, like I was in Italy.
So I'll ask it as bluntly as possible then, since we've got so much, I'll just say oversizing. What percentage of new homes do you think need a dehumidifier?
Where there's little code compliance, I'll take my own home state, Kentucky. We have no building tightness requirement in Kentucky. So whole house dehumidifier, probably a big thing, because we don't have any building tightness. So we're not keeping the humidity out. So we've got a leakier building than what we would have in an area where there's a high level of code compliance. The areas that have higher humidity environments, I'd say, because we are still oversizing tremendously, because we don't believe, when I give a builder that's building a 1,500 square foot house a load calculation, it's only 18,000 BTUs and everybody else is at 36,000 BTUs, the builder oftentimes sides with the larger system because they don't want to get the call. In fact, what more often than not happens is it's extremely oversized, and it becomes a point where the homeowner ends up having to put a whole house dehumidifier on after the fact. And it's not the best scenario because it was never designed to have a whole house humidifier. So now you're trying to put things in attics, or you're trying to put things in basements where there's not enough room. You're not able to get the dehumidification set right. So I wouldn't want to venture a completely accurate guess, but I'll go on the low conservative end, Ken, and I'll say probably somewhere around 70%, 80%. That would be a conservative number.
70 to 80%. And then obviously then you've got fresh air and all of that. So what about conditioned attics? Do you think each of those should have a dehu, or would you have air movement? What do you see on that?
So conditioned attic, there probably should be some air movement. I'm a huge fan of, and unfortunately, we're already writing the prescription after the fact. I'm a huge fan of, let's see what the data tells us. Let's not write a prescription without doing a test. My signature line on emails years ago was, prescription without diagnostics is malpractice. And I'm sure I stole that from somebody because I've seen it before. But I would, and I challenge everybody I do training for. If I wrote you a prescription for blood pressure medication, would you take it? And I usually try to pick out the 25-year-old that's in great looking health and all that. And I usually get, well, no. And I said, why not? And I'll get, well, I don't have high blood pressure. I said, how do you know? So without testing, and I think the data would suggest that, and enough testing has been done by different manufacturers to suggest that maybe we need some air movement. What that number is, I couldn't tell you, but I will tell you what is suggested. It's 50 CFM per 1,000 square foot of floor area. Maybe we need a dehumidifier. If we do a great job of keeping the or sealing the roof deck, the conditioned attic, whether it's foam or whether it's insulation, because there are some opportunities for insulation. If you look at Building Science's website, you'll see that unvented attics, even though they're not spray foam, have been around for a long time. So the data suggests that we need some air movement, and the data may suggest that we need some dehumidification. I have seen personally and designed personally, because we made sure that the roof deck was completely sealed. And then we also made sure that the ceiling floor, or the attic floor, the ceiling was completely sealed. If all of those are sealed and the ductwork is sealed up tight, where would the moisture come from?
That makes sense. So, I mean, you're keeping it out.
Yeah, dehumidification may not be necessary. As a matter of fact, I've worked on a project where we sealed the roof deck, we sealed the ceiling floor or the attic, and then we have ductwork up in the attic, but it is sealed down to about 1 air change or 1 CFM per 100 square foot. And we're running in a climate 2A, which is down in the Florida area. We're running about 12% relative humidity. There's not going to be a lot that condenses at 12% relative humidity. So we're not going to have moisture issues. So if you really, really, really hit the bullseye and not just the target on the building design and on the actual building construction, and you verified, you're probably not going to, but I would suggest that happens rarely. I think we're just trying to hit the target, not the bullseye. And as a result of it, I'd say more often than not, we need to put in whole house dehumidification, or at a bare minimum, if we've got a sealed roof deck, we're going to need a dehumidifier up in the attic.
So on existing homes, then, do you think that, we'll say outside of your students, do you think the trade is moving at all away from box swapping and working with other trades to go after more of a whole house approach? Are you seeing them do that? Or, I mean, we see the companies that want to add insulation, that want to add air sealing. But like you said, there's 100,000, and I can't name you 100 that work with us. So, are you seeing any of that? Or is there talk about it?
So Ken, the market is making it happen. And here's what I mean by that. 2022 was a record year in HVAC equipment deliveries. Well over 10 million residential units. Over the course of a 4-year period from 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22, we installed and delivered over 40 million residential air conditioners and heat pumps in the United States. And then 2023 hit. And by the end of 2023, we were down, and I just used a conservative number, and I took out the new construction. We were down about 1.1 million residential air conditioning units in the United States. If you take, and I took out the new construction. We're dealing with replacement alone. And I'm not even talking about gas-fired furnaces or boilers. Just talking about air conditioning and heat pumps. If you take Trane's average number of replacement price-wise, they say between $10,800 and $14,800. Well, I took the low end at $10,800. The industry saw a reduction in revenue of over $12 billion in 2023. How are we going to make up that $12 billion? So I work with a number of contractors who have recently jumped on the insulation bandwagon. And the primary reason is because they lost $12 billion in revenue. So my big concern is, and my big hope is that because if we take a look at 2005, that was our previous record year, a little over 8,600,000 residential units. By 2009, we dropped down to about 5,157,000 units. We didn't come back in 2010 like gangbusters, 5,167,000 residential units. So we had a 40% drop off over a 4-year period. If we have that 40% drop off after 2022, That means that our market's not going to start coming back again. And it's not the economy, it's the economy of equipment. If our last record was 2005, then our next record would probably be about 2020. Guess what? That was when our next record was. So about 15-year life cycle for air conditioning. 12 years maybe farther down south, 18 years a little bit further up north. 15-year average. So nothing to do with the economy, just the economy of longevity of equipment. So having said that, my hope is that when in 2020, if we started dropping off in 2023, 2027, 2028, when we start coming back and we start increasing our numbers again, and the curve starts going back up a little bit, that we don't throw away the insulation, the air sealing. We're not using it as just a bridge until the box sales come back again. That's my hope. Fortunately, we're early enough in the game right now, because if you can work with contractors, if I can work with contractors and show them the value, the contractor I was working with yesterday, they didn't understand until I showed them that if I air seal a house that was loose to just an average level, if I insulate a house that had an R13 to just an R38 level, if I take ductwork that's in the attic and I replace an R4 ductwork with an R6, and most places you can put an R8 in, and I seal it up, that in Louisville, Kentucky, that would amount to a 30-year life cycle savings with flat utility rates, Ken, of about $45,000 less waste based on our current utility rate. I did a similar modeling sample to that in Dallas, Texas, and it came out to $52,000 for a 1,500 square foot house, because your design temperatures are a little bit different than ours are in Louisville, and your utility rate is just a touch higher than ours is in Louisville. Shameless plug, I'll do it for nothing just because I love helping the industry. Rick at BSPTLLC.com. If you send me an email and ask me to do a modeling in your area so you can get a true value. See, with a box swap, you're never going to return on investment, because the equipment's only going to last about 15 years. And what was the cost of the equipment? What I like to tell builders or contractors, say, if I build a brand new house today, Ken, I build it today, in 100 years in Arlington, Texas, how many air conditioners will I have replaced?
6, 7?
6, 7? Sure. If I build that same house today and I make sure that I've got it well insulated, sealed well, good ventilation, good tight ductwork, how many times will I have to reblow the attic in that house?
Never.
Okay. So where's the real return on investment?
Insulation and air sealing.
Yes, sir. Every single time. And one of the mistakes that we make when we're talking to homeowners about this is that, oh, we're insulating, we're air sealing. Air sealing doesn't resonate as well. One of the things that I suggest to contractors, I ask them, I said, Ken, you've got you yourself, you have an energy consumer. It's called your automobile, correct? And you got an energy supplier. It's called the gas pump. Then you have an energy distribution system. It's called the hose. Okay. You're seeing the connection here to the house. Air conditioner, air handler, the duct system is the distribution system. It's the hose, and the house is the energy consumer. What would you do if you squeezed the nozzle and $2 out of every 10 ended up hitting the ground?
I would fix whatever was broken.
Well, and because you don't own it, you'd probably stop the bleeding before it got to $2. And then you'd go in and you'd ask that gas station attendant, and this is where the paradigm shift comes in. You wouldn't say, hey, who's going to pay for this savings? No, we'd ask who's going to pay for this waste, because that's really what it is. It's not, when I reduce the waste, it isn't a savings, it's a reduction in waste. And people don't want to waste things. Savings is an abstract that oftentimes homeowners don't connect with. But if I tell you, Ken, you're going to be paying for energy. You can pay for energy from, we'll say, Louisville Gas and Electric Company, and get only 80% of that energy in the house, and 20% is going to fly out. or you can pay for us, our energy. And now from here in perpetuity, as long as you live in this home or anybody lives in this home, you're going to get as close to 100% of the energy delivered to the home and not have 20, because according to DOE, the average duct system leaks between 20 and 40%. More sheet metal homes, probably closer to 40. More ductboard and flex duct, probably closer to 20. My experience has been, I'll give you a great little story of a contractor in Jacksonville, Florida, who knew I was coming in to do a BPI IDL training. So instead of doing it in a shop, we did it at his house. But he had 3 systems in his home. Ductwork was up in the attic. The master suite had a 2-ton air conditioner. Should have been an 800 CFM. He had his lead installer and his installation manager come in and replace the ductwork before we got there. Now, I know you. If one of the Novacrats wanted you to come and do some work at their house, you're going to do a great job on everybody's home. But the guy that writes the check, you're going to do just that next level. You're going to make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Well, they were doing it at the owner's house, replaced the entire 2-ton duct system. We did a duct leakage test on the house, 18%. 18% leakage on a newly replaced duct system by the lead installer and the installation manager on the owner's home. And they knew I was coming. So you know they wanted to knock it out of the ballpark. And they didn't even get to first base.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So on that subject though, because you train a lot of people in, various trades, insulators as well. And you mentioned doing a load calc for any insulator that sends you one. Can we talk a little bit about the new BPI certifications and what you're seeing there now that these things have been out there a little while? What are the main differences you see comparing the BAP and the BAT to the BA or the building analyst certification? What's come out of all this?
Okay, so what I will tell you, and you were in Kansas City a number of years ago when we did a trainer with Kevin Kennedy and Joe Medosh and gang, and we did trainer on the Healthy Homes Evaluator. Unfortunately, the Healthy Homes Evaluator never caught traction. And the powers that be at BPI still felt really, really passionate about the healthy side. So what I will tell you is the comparison between the building analyst, the most recent iteration of the building analyst prior to the change to building analyst technician, is a massive amount of health and safety. Massive amount. We never discussed radon. On the new building analyst technician, there are 135 grading points. And a number of those grading points, compared to the old building analyst, which had about 40, a number of those grading points have multiple items in the grading point, such as 3 characteristics of radon. Well, if you just tell me it's colorless and odorless, you missed the third one, so you'd miss that. So you have to actually get 3 points to get 1 point. Colorless, odorless, and tasteless. And most people that, especially with radon, when I started having a conversation about radon, I've never heard of it. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about radon. 21,000 lung cancer deaths a year, according to the EPA, for non-smokers. If you have an EPA's action levels are 4 picocuries per liter before you should put a radon mitigation fan on or system in. Well, 4 picocuries per liter, and I spoke with Kevin Kennedy a couple months ago about this. We keep looking at the death rate of adults from lung cancer, but what about the kid that is subjected to 4 years in an area with high concentrations of radon? 4 picocuries per liter would be the equivalent of your 2-year-old having 200 X-rays a year and smoking 8 cigarettes a day. That level of exposure. What are you doing to the lungs of that 2-year-old to have 200 X-rays a year? And that's EPA's action level for finally doing some mitigation. What if you're at 6 or 7 or 8? I mean, if 4 picocuries per liter is 200 X-rays or 8 cigarettes a day for a 2-year-old, What is happening at higher levels, and what is happening to that child? And according to Kevin, who was with Children's Mercy Hospital, one of the world-renowned hospitals for children that probably should have been doing studies, we don't know the impact, the long-term impact on a child that might spend 4 years there. So radon gets discussed more. And the crazy part about it is I've begun seeing contractors that I've done training for 2 or 3 months later reach out to me and say, we need some radon training. So that makes me feel good that they paid attention to that part of it, because they never had paid attention. There was a condo in Florida, in the Tampa, Florida area. If 4 picocuries per liter is an action level, according to the EPA, they were at 313 picocuries per liter on the 11th floor. And the problem is we tighten houses up. Looser houses probably had the ability for the radon to escape because it leaked like a sieve. We tighten the houses up, and where's the escaping of the radon? And I won't get into details on what causes radon, where radon comes from, but the ideal is that the newer BAT, building analyst technician, takes a lot deeper dive into the healthy homes. We're talking about lead. We're talking about asbestos. Okay, so we're going a lot deeper dive into. It keeps the same infiltration training. It keeps the same combustion safety training, but it takes a lot deeper dive into the healthy homes. And it does take a little bit deeper dive into renewables and that sort of thing. Do we get into a mode inspector level? No, but it's more of a higher level of awareness, which means that when the technician walks into a home, whether they're insulation or heat and air conditioning technician, they have some of the blinders taken off. They're looking at things a little bit closer because they're understanding the health impacts of that. And the beauty of it is I have my own private doctor, my own cardiologist. I've begun to have conversations with him about particle pollution and the elderly. You may or may not be aware of this. Particle pollution is responsible for about 130,000 fatal heart attacks in the United States every year. Now, some of the prescriptions we're writing as far as technicians go and companies go to our homeowners are valid, but they do a good job, and we didn't even realize why they were doing a good job. So we don't do enough deep dive, and that's one of the things that the building analyst technician is doing. The building analyst professional is more geared toward taking the data that the technician gathered in the home and then being able to put it into a work scope to be able to develop that work scope on what to do and how to prioritize for the homeowner. So it's a little bit deeper dive into the modeling, a little bit deeper dive into the work scope development.
Okay, so by work scope development, there also then, as these programs come online, rebates, things like that, would the BAP then be the person who needs to understand all of the rebates, everything involved, how to monetize projects, and all of that?
Yes. Yep. The BAP would be the person who took the work scope development and tried to convert it into how can we best leverage the resources, the financial resources that are out there to be able to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. What we should always remember on the BAP or any other of the certifications is we need to prioritize the health and safety before we prioritize the rebate. If we can connect the dot together, but if you've got a very efficient home and because you air sealed it so super tight and didn't add ventilation to it, then you're creating a more hazardous or potentially hazardous environment than if you'd have just added the mechanical ventilation first and then air sealed it, or do the two together, whatever the case may be. But we can't just keep our blinders on and say, oh, heat pump, $8,000 rebate. Okay. If the house leaks like a sieve, we will probably see higher utility bills from a heat pump than we would have with a gas furnace. We need to prioritize how and understand how the work scope needs to be developed to be the best for the homeowner, not the best for the contractor.
That makes sense. So How do you see AI affecting the HVAC industry in the next few years?
So AI is, if we end up with full 100% trust in AI, it can lead us in some bad direction, because we still need to use, the HVAC industry still needs to use the experience. I told this group last week, you know what instrumentation does for me? I've been in this thing for 42 years. I can usually take a set of symptoms and I can help with the diagnostics, and 90% of the time I can nail it without using instrumentation. What instrumentation will do is validate what my diagnosis was. Okay, so AI will just do, and again, with heat and air conditioning, I don't know that we've seen all that AI will become, but what I know is that a number of folks that are using some AI generated information are bypassing a few steps. My hope is that we still continue to understand how things work without just relying on some kind of artificial intelligence, advanced intelligence to make the decision for us. We still need to be technicians. We still need to understand how houses work as a system. And I don't know that AI will help us at this point, will help us be able to understand how okay, so we're going to make the load as low as possible, but what did we do for the comfort and the health and safety of the occupants? Will it take that into consideration? So we have to, we're not dealing with computers, we're dealing with humans. So human to human, to me, AI ends up needing to be just an additional tool, but not the end all to be all. But I unfortunately see some companies potentially using AI as a way of hiring lower grade technicians and thinking that they're going to be able to pay these people less and be able to do just as good a job as that 20 or 30-year-old seasoned technician who's been around the block and has seen a few things a few times.
That was part of my question, because we were talking about building analyst, professional building analyst, technician, that I see coming to class, like with someone like you, or coming to IDI's insulation class, as going somewhere to gain the wisdom that has been gathered over years by someone that they're trying to impart to you. And if they're trying to do all of this through, we'll just say lower intellectually skilled employees, or less reliance on time in the field, then you wind up with, almost a just go do this everywhere kind of mentality. And so that makes me nervous as someone doing these trainings. What do you feel is probably the first thing you would go and get? Meaning, do you think everyone should be a BAT?
So BPI now requires, before you're able to challenge the building analyst technician, they require you to challenge the building science principles. There's an online version of a book, or there's a hard copy version of the book. There's a 100-question test. It's an open book test. So it's designed, and my suggestion would be for every employee of every company to have at least a building science principles. So do we need everybody to be a building analyst technician? No, but I think that everybody should have at least a building, and I'm talking about dispatchers, I'm talking about, because they can then start to have a conversation with the homeowners and prepare the homeowner for what the technician is going to do. We like to refer to that as HVAC triage. There should be a couple of things done on every home, no matter who's walking in that home as soon as they walk in the door. One is personal carbon monoxide. Walk in the door and look at your personal carbon monoxide detector, and that will generally, and one of the things that I suggest is taking a look at the CO monitor and looking at it for 8 to 10 seconds, and then putting it back on your belt clip, and the homeowner will say, "What is that?" So you're starting to have a conversation about carbon monoxide. Is it going to be a deep dive? No, but it'll be a conversation that we would not previously have had. And generally what homeowners will do is, and I'll tell the contractors, make sure you out in the truck, you've got a cut sheet. It's a one pager on carbon monoxide, and tell them I'm going to go out and get it when I go grab my tools, my measuring tape, whatever you're going to get, and then set it on the kitchen table. And that leads to a conversation about carbon monoxide. Another thing should be a dominant duct leakage test. I don't care what business you're in. If you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, if you're an insulation contractor, if you're an HVAC contractor, first of all, have relationships with each other, because we don't live in a silo world. We live in a home that we have a lot of specialists, but no general practitioner, no family doctor who understands all of it. Okay, so the building analyst technician would have a better understanding of that. But when you go in, if the ductwork is outside of the thermal envelope, you can add insulation all day long. You're not sealing up the ductwork, and there's contaminants in the attic. What lives in an attic, Ken? Critters.
Yeah.
While they're living in the attic, what are they doing? Yeah, we don't want to think about it. But sometimes they die in the attic and they decompose. Well, if you got air leakage or if you got duct leakage, yeah, we can talk about energy savings, but what about the contaminant pathways? So we start to have a conversation that leads to a healthier home too. And so I would talk about the building science principles. Everybody should have it. Take the test, get the certificate. It's not expensive, and it's something that most technicians that I see that take it, even if they don't go the building analyst technician, man, they're proud. They answered that test, and they got a certificate they can hang on the wall. We like credentials in our industry, don't we? We love having that certificate. It shows we're just a little bit better than the others. Or we at least have, not necessarily better, but we've at least applied ourselves. And the certificate is like the meter. I might already know it, but the meter verified what I already knew. I might already know it, but the certificate said, yes, he does. And it lets the world know that you knew it. It's okay to brag just a little bit. Just don't go overboard. So I would suggest the building science principles for everybody. It's a great, everybody that I have come to the building analyst technician, and I've done probably 120, 130 certifications since it came about a little over a year ago, has said, oh my gosh, the building science principles helped me with the building analyst technician. And it helped me understand some things. And some of these people have been in different businesses related to our industries for a number of years. They're like, it helped me. Building science principles, then the certificate, then the building. Does everybody need a building analyst technician? No, the infiltration duct leakage would be the IDL, would be another good one. Great for code compliance, but I'm not just talking about code compliance. If you're replacing ductwork, how do you know how bad it's leaking and if it even needs to be replaced? Now, sure, if it's falling apart up in an attic, yes. Okay, but what about the ductwork that, quote, looks good? How tight or leaky is it? And I'll use this example. If we have a 3-ton air conditioner, and according to DOE, the average is 20 to 40% duct leakage, tell me how much sense this would make. So 20% of 3 tons is 7,200 BTUs. Who in their right mind would have a 7,200 BTU window unit in their window turn around backward? Would that make any sense whatsoever?
You wouldn't, but in our industry, because our audience is going to be insulators, still, I say, if you're not testing, you're guessing. If you're not going to break out a blower door and go find where the leaks are, then the best you can do is vac out the entire thing and hope that you're capable of covering everywhere that there's something not correct. And so I'm a big fan of an IDL, and I think that.
Let me throw this. I got to interrupt you on this one real quick. If the ductwork is in the attic or the ductwork is in the crawl space, isn't that ductwork now part of the thermal envelope and the pressure boundary?
Sure it is.
Why can't the heating or the insulation contractor offer sealing there too?
We often do.
So air sealing and duct sealing should both be a big part of y'all's work scope.
On that, are there any states that you know of where we're not allowed to? Because I don't know of any personally. That I know we can't work on the equipment. I know we can't add runs, do all that. But do you know of any states specifically that do not allow insulators to go put Pookie on or mastic or air seal?
None that I can tell you that I know of. And what I'll say is, in Kentucky, we had a little bit of a challenge to it here in Kentucky. And what my comment was is, if you read the law, this was to the HVAC division in Kentucky, if you read the law, it says modify or alter. It never says seal. As a matter of fact, the insulation air sealing contractor is doing what in the heck the friggin' HVAC contractor should have done. They're doing it. And when I started explaining that it now becomes part of the pressure boundary, and would you need to have an HVAC license to seal around a recessed light? Well, no, that doesn't make sense. Well, all that is an addition to the pressure boundary. Because once it goes through that boot, it's now, the inner liner on that flex duct is now part of the pressure boundary. That boot or that takeoff on that supply plenum is now part of the pressure boundary. It's all part of so we won. They're attempting to challenge some of the HVAC contractors. My comment was always, okay, you're challenging, yet if you were doing your job, there'd be no reason for them to even want to do any air sealing of the ductwork.
That would be a fact.
Touche.
Well, Rick, this has been a lot of fun. I'm glad we got the chance to do this, and I'm glad we got the chance to talk.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on today. I just can't thank you enough for sharing wisdom that you've gained over the years.
Ken, always a pleasure, my friend.
Well, for all of you out there, Rick did offer to do a load calc for you guys if you want to see what the return is on a project, just to give you an example. But by all means, I wholeheartedly agree. Getting the building science principles under your belt is a big deal. That's why your IDI rep can get you a copy of that electronically so that you can study and go and take the test. But I also agree that we should have an IDL and a blower door and an infrared camera. They are the main tools of our industry. If you have questions on these or any of the products we carry, please reach out to your local rep or any of us at IDI, where we look forward to earning your business every day.